Endangered Languages stream, we have a panel discussion on documenting indigenous lives and languages, for which Professor A. Giridhar Rao will be moderating, who teaches courses on language and literature in education, English language pedagogy in multilingual India, children's literature, Esperanto and linguistic democracy, and science fiction at Azim Premji University, Bangalore. He publishes on these themes in English and Esperanto. He has translated into Esperanto M.K. Gandhi's autobiography and some of the writings of Sadat Hasan Manto and Faiz Ahmed Faiz. He is a member of Academia de Esperanto. He blogs in English on Boli and in Esperanto on Lingvokaj Vivo, which are blogs. Thank you. Please take over, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the last session in this stream of Indigenous and Endangered Languages. In the 5 sessions that we've had in this stream, many aspects of Indigenous life and Indigenous languages have been touched upon, covered, discussed, revealed, discovered by us as in the audience from our experts and so on. So I hope for those of you who have stayed on for a few of these sessions, they have been really worthwhile and enlightening. In this last session, we continue the thread of Indigenous lives and languages, the aspect of documentation. So in some sense, it is a continuation of the previous session with Dr. Madan Meena. For this session, we have 2 experts, Sujoy, Sarkar, and Sumanaspati. Let me briefly introduce the 2 of them while I invite them to the stage. Sujoy and Sumanaspati, please come to the stage as well. Yeah, this way. Yeah, Sujoy, please. Sujoy Sarkar, Dr. Sujoy Sarkar is currently working at the Central Institute of Indian Languages, CIIL, Mysuru. Since March 2016 until very recently, he was also the officer in charge for the Scheme for Protection and Preservation of Endangered Languages, SPPEL, at CIIL. His MPhil was on medium of instruction in primary education for the Toto tribe, and his doctoral dissertation was titled Linguistic Human Rights and Language Discrimination, a critical study of language and education policy for tribal education in India. So clearly bang in the middle of the kinds of concerns that our stream has been exploring these last 3 days. My other guest here is Sumanaspati, who has been a radio broadcaster, a writer, promoter of serious documentary cinema, photographer, and now a farmer. I should also immediately say that his photography is on display just along in this salon itself, which I invite you to please take a look at after this session. During the last decade, he has spent much of his professional and personal life in Adilabad, documenting and showcasing in various formats the Adivasi and folk cultures of North Telangana, from Adilabad to Mancherial. He has so far held 2 exhibitions of his photographs. So may I welcome Sujoy and Sumanaspati, and begin by asking Sumanaspati to reflect for us a little bit on this idea of documentation itself. What is this? Why should documentation matter? Why should we be doing it? And who are we doing it for? So why documentation is important, and who is it actually that we are documenting for? Sumanaspati?
Well, I think, pardon me to by responding that this is actually a common sense question. But yes, when you get into it, it tends to be quite complex also. Yeah, we do it for ourselves, we do it for the communities whom we are documenting, as times are changing and the disappearance of the original culture of many of these communities is almost in sight. So documentation is important for everyone now. It's also more or less likely that this would be a repository to look back at how things were when we will not be in a position to see any of these in reality. So documentation today I think is very very critical because for many communities, for many traditions, this is the last opportunity we have. 5 years or 10 years from now, there will be no way that we will have anything to record. Even as of now, when I have been working for radio and recording folk songs, folk oral traditions, oral knowledge, and also their narratives. This is all part of the usual business of radio. And recording things for archival purposes also has been the function of radio since the inception of radio and All India Radio also. But we have found it more and more difficult to find really genuine and knowledgeable speakers, singers. Most of them are gone. I wish we had done this 2 or 3 decades ago. That's what one consistently feels while pursuing this very act of recording things for archival purposes. So archiving, recording something and preserving, that is one thing. Analysis of it is another thing. Converting it into forms by transcription or by translating into the kind of language in which it can be received, that's another thing. So there are many things that go, that follow once the basic documentation and archiving is done. A lot has to come after that, and that too has not happened sufficiently. So I think it's important in every which way at this juncture for our culture, for our existence, and for our sense of who we are, our own identity.
Yeah. Thank you for that thoughtful answer. It is an act of memory and it is an act of bearing witness, both of which are cultural acts that we as people who are partly responsible for the state of these languages and their speakers, we need to take responsibility for. Let me turn to Sujoy now, Sujoy Sarkar, and ask him to give us a kind of overview of the work that CIIL has been doing in this scheme for promotion and preservation of endangered languages, SPELL. Sujoy, could you tell us what geographies they work in, what languages they work in?
Thank you, Giri. The Central Institute of Indian Languages, it's a subordinate office of Ministry of Education. It was established in 1969, and our institute is working for tribal languages for last more than 5 decades. Okay, and now let's come to the project Professor Giri mentioned, Scheme for Protection and Preservation of Endangered Languages. See, 1990s onward, there was a huge discussion about endangered languages. Okay, the terminology endangered languages. Okay, every language is, many languages are disappearing or rather dying. And 2009, UNESCO Atlas of Endangered Languages came up. And the day the Atlas came up, it became a world news. And in fact, in India, there was, many news reports that 197 languages are dying in India. Okay. Endangered. Okay. And now let's come to 2012. 2012, there was a meeting, CAB, Committee of Advisory, CAB, Advisory Board of Education. This committee advised Government of India to implement or initiate different project or scheme which can be helpful for education. And that meeting, it was discussed that 2009 Atlas came and 2012 the meeting happened, and this endangered language issue discussed there. And it was decided that the government will start scheme for protection and preservation of endangered languages. And 2013 it was launched. Okay, and 2014 onwards, the real work started. And how do we work? We have our internal resource person, research scholar. They do language documentation in different areas, and at the same time we collaborated with different universities, Osmania University, University of Hyderabad, and I mean across India. I mean we collaborated. This was the module for working. And if you talk about zone, we have 7 zones. Andaman is one of the major zone for us. Then East Central, Southern Zone, Northeastern, then Western and Northern. Okay, these are the zones. So we divided zones, and our list don't match with the UNESCO list. Okay, and the list prepared by us, it was not by our institute. It was our institute agency, but different professor, renowned professor across India, different universities. They sit down and they decided, see, you will not find out less than 10,000 speaker language data in Census of India. 1961 you will get the data. 1971 onwards you will not get the data.
Those languages are not even recorded, you are saying. If you have fewer than 10,000 speakers.
Yeah, it's not recorded on public document. The data is there, but it's not published. Okay, so we decided, let's consider the number. If you see UNESCO's endangered language parameters, population size of population is one important parameter. And we thought, okay, 10,000 population data is only available in 61. So let's take that and see if, let's say 10,000 population language, population and speaker is two different things. Probably Telugu population may be, let's say X, but the same number of Telugu population may not speak Telugu. One of the main concerns, now Telugu, Tamil, in fact Bengali, I am a Bengali speaker, very much concerned in city areas, their child, they don't speak Bengali anymore, or Tamil or Telugu anymore. Okay, so that was the one parameter. We choose 10,000 number, and we choose 117 languages in our list, and we try to work on these languages.
So 117 languages.
Yeah, 117.
And the documentation that you mentioned consists of researchers meeting speakers, native speakers of those languages.
Yeah, they do field work.
What kind of language samples do they collect?
Okay. Yeah.
Just briefly.
Yeah. So see, it's very limited. We do linguistic work, so we mostly concentrate on word, sentence list. So our main goal is preparing dictionary and grammar and ethnographic information. But it's very narrow sense. This is not broad sense of documentation.
Yes. So the documentation for these 117 languages is ongoing, or has the project completed the job?
It's ongoing.
So is the information that is collected, does it find its way into the public domain that we as citizens can access?
Yeah. So it's not launched yet, but I am happy to share with you. We have a very minimum. We have you can count 1, 2, 3 language archive in India. One of the first language archive in India done by Central Sikkim University, Center for Endangered Languages. May I add about the Center for Endangered Languages also? Okay. Government of India also to protect these endangered languages, they initiated Center for Endangered Languages. 9 central university they got these centers. In fact, your Hyderabad University, they have a center, but it's non-functional. Sorry to say that. Okay. Okay. So
these centers.
Yeah. This center, they also contributed in their own way. They got the fund from UGC, and we get the fund directly from Ministry of Education. Yeah. So the public access of the data. So CIL, we are trying to develop the language archive of India. We named it Bhasa Sanchika. We have already 7,000 entry, and more than 150 languages data. So 1969 onward, whatever data we had with us, we are making it public, and it's raw data. Let's say you want to listen this raw sentence or raw words, you can go back and you can cite and you can do the research. It will be launched soon.
Okay. It will be public access, open access.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It's already public. I mean, some of the people they are accessing. Daily we have 500 GB. I mean, traffic.
Oh, I see.
I mean, it's not launched, but I mean, some people they are accessing.
So what will be the name of that your Bhasha Sanchika?
Bhasha Sanchika.
SANCHIKA.
Okay.
Yeah. Bhasha Sanchika. Okay. So that our audience can make a note of that. Sumanaspati, just to come back to you, you yourself have been deeply influenced by a language documentation person, Heimendorf, whose work in India has inspired you. Could you say a little bit about that journey of working with the Gonds?
Yeah, my relationship with tribal cultures actually started only after I got transferred to Adilabad as part of my service. You have these transfers every 4 or 5 years. All India Radio. Yeah. Before that, I had done some substantial work in recording, especially for archival purposes, folk songs and folk narratives of Telangana in working in Hyderabad. Yeah, but after I chose to go to Adilabad when there was need for me to choose a place to which I can go on transfer, I thought, I mean, we have some nice tribal cultures there about which we have been listening to, and the Gusadi dance, the Gusadi dancer, that form.
Say a little bit about
yeah,
it.
Gusadi is almost everyone must have seen an exotic looking ash smeared dancer who wears a big peacock crown on his head. And this people in Telangana, Andhra must have seen at various public functions. But within tribal culture, it's something else actually. It's not a wild, exotic kind of a character. He's a guru. He's a divine entity who comes visiting. So I went there thinking that I will have opportunity to learn and about Gond and other tribal cultures and do a recording that's possible. But I had never been to Adivasi area before that, and I found them very reluctant to talk to or converse initially. I had a staff member who was himself Gondi, so I started taking him along. But having the work of Heimendorf there, which is a substantial, study of one particular culture, we have very few examples. Although British and foreign anthropologists have been studying our tribal communities since mid 19th century. The kind of work which Heimendorf has done on the Raj Gonds of Adilabad, you don't find a similar example about any other Gond community either, not to speak of other communities. So this he did in the 1940s, and that work exists in English, of course. So the books were available after a little bit of effort, and then going through that big tome, it takes quite a bit of time. But then after reading that, and then when you start broaching something which you have picked up from that book with the Adivasis, they start coming up. Oh, this guy knows a little something about us. He's not just asking some weird kind of a question. Tell me the basic things. So, you could get that contact through reading Heimendorf's work. And I think that because we don't have many such scholars, we have anthropology departments, etc. But if you go to them and, a broadcaster should actually get help from them, instead of he himself trying to get into and learn a subject. But since that's not there, I had to do it. And gradually it became a very learning experience. And by using the kind of information I could get from Heimendorf's work and then trying to match it, because he had done that study, by that time it was already 70 years old work, although he had revised it once in the 70s, but it's primarily the research he has done in the 1940s.
40s, right?
Yeah.
This is Heimendorf, Haimendorf.
Yeah, correct. Yes. There's a one photograph, where you find their statues. He and his wife's statue. They are almost revered as gods by the Gonds of Adilabad. And this is a rare distinction for an anthropologist anywhere in the world. Yeah. So that made my work easy. Then he had recorded, there was no recording, but somehow he recorded their mythologies at length by actually manually scribing them, and then translated them into English. But for the purpose of book, he had to actually condense them a lot, and that is not how people actually sing and listen to them. So when you start recording them, you see that it has a lilting, one single kind of a melody which carries through, and in which all the emotions are expressed. But the stories go on for hours and hours. You have women singing them. You have professional bards, who are attached to the Gonds, the Pardhans and the Totis. These people sing their specific mythological stories. So Gonds have their own creation myth, and each clan of Gond has its own set of myths following that creation myth. So you have a main myth, mythological story, which tells how the Gonds came about. And then they got divided into different gotras or clans and sub-gotra, sub-clans, etc. So each sub-clan also may have its own specific deity and its specific history. And that also is sung by the Pardhans or the Totis attached to that particular clan. So there is a specific clan type of relationship between the Gonds and their, their dependent or their memory keepers, the Gonds or Totis.
So you mentioned that Heimendorff's work was in the 1940s.
Yeah.
And in your own research, in your own re-digging or trying to find out more, were there examples of Heimendorff that what Heimendorff describes in the 1940s you have simply not been able to find?
Yes, lot of them actually. But we also found a lot which he did not record. Because obviously the area of operation of a researcher can only be limited. He can't be visiting all the Pardhan singers, all the communities. Every 20 or 40 kilometers you move ahead, and then you will find some change in the culture or in the way particular mythological story is narrated. And the time also brings a lot of change. The bards, while singing, they also bring certain things into it. So certain kinds of stories which he mentions, and certain kind of relationships which he explains, for some we could not find any singer at all.
Oh, I see.
Because those particular clans or sub-clans, they stopped singing.
Oh.
But others were continuing. So we found other kind of stories. For instance, there is one fantastic festival of the Gonds called Dandari. It's probably the most beautiful folk festival or tribal festival in Telangana and Andhra. They do this festival during the season of Deepavali.
What was
Dandari.
Dandari.
So in which you have a Kolatam Dandiya-like dance also, but it comes with many other things. So in this festival, a big troop from one village, only of males, which has drummers, which has Kolatam or Dandiya dancers, which has some of those divine, semi-divine, guru-like characters called Gusadis. And they go and visit that village. They play their drums, they sing, they perform, they do skits. They are received very honorably with great regard by the villagers. The village also has a similar troupe, so together also they perform. So this entertaining and regaling goes on for about 1.5 days. They are also fed very well. There is a lot of greeting each other. Every visiting person is greeted by every person from the village. So it's a kind of fantastic re-establishment of relationship between villages and reconnecting within the community. And then they depart. So in this order of the festival, you could say that there are probably 150 stages of different rituals, different performative aspects, different ways of greeting, eating, all that. But one after the other is done without anyone ordering anyone to do this or that. I mean, if you have to organize that kind of a thing here, you will probably need 6 months of dress rehearsal before you get that kind of perfection.
So I was just wondering, from this terrific description, energetic description that you have given us, you have shared with us, it sounds like a vibrant living culture. In are there aspects of it, however, that you are worried about? Because the tone you began with, by talking when you were speaking about the urgent need for documentation, and so on, was a much more endangered one, a sense of urgency. This, however, sounds like a vibrant.
Yeah, the description of this festival may sound like that. Certain ritual aspects stay for a long time. Festive aspects stay for a long time. Although the community may not remember the deeper significances, the symbolisms that are behind, embedded in it, the stories which are behind it. So, very few people, for instance, they do this Dandari festival very well. And now, with newer, some government support and people having some more money than earlier, in some villages it is done on a much larger scale. The population has also increased, so you have more drums.
And you have young people participating.
Yes. Yeah. That aspect is there, but it's not as if other aspects of the culture are remembered so well. And there are many villages where managing this Dandari, requires a lot of logistic support from the community. And in many villages, that kind of integrity, cohesion has gone. So it's not, you cannot say that as if it is happening in every village. Yes, in some senses, certain traditions are still continuing very well among the Gond community and other tribes also. But what is disappearing is also quite fast. You could say that certain aspects of development reached there a little late, 2 or 3 decades late. But now, in the last 10 years, the rapidity with which this change is coming, the disappearance of the culture has also, I sense that it has begun to disappear and change. So the number of people, to do a Dandari festival, so many people have to work without cribbing, without asking for recognition. Giving recognition for every small bit of work you do is a modern phenomenon. It doesn't exist in the true village or tribal community. So educated people who are into jobs, etc., they may not be participating in the village anymore. So while as the number of people who get educated increases, it's very difficult to say whether they will go back and participate in their own original culture with the same equanimity and not asking for specific recognition or a special treatment.
A very prominent fact about indigenous cultures all over the world is that the schools kill those cultures. This primarily because the schooling is not happening in Gondi, right? Isn't that a massively worrying phenomenon?
Yes, it's a massively worrying thing. Anyway, it is not happening anywhere in the country either. We are failing there. We are failing these communities everywhere because to do that requires a kind of commitment, a kind of sensitive understanding, a kind of continuity in policy without breaks.
Yes.
Policy is made and then it breaks, disappears. The officer gets transferred, the thing which he has established very nicely goes back to zero. So this kind of beginning from zero has happened in our modern history many times over in the way government departments are functioned. But to tell about Adilabad, it's a very interesting example that Heimendorf himself, when he came to Adilabad in the 1940s, he wanted to go to Nagaland, but because of the Second World War, he had to base himself in Telangana, and then he preferred to study the Rajgond community of Adilabad. Then with the kind of small reports that he was sending to the ICS officers in Hyderabad, an ICS officer called Grigson, who had done some study on Gonds of the Bastar, he thought that he would assign him the responsibility of creating an education system for the Gonds. Because all the schools had come out and Marathi and Telugu medium education was happening in the surrounding districts. There were very few Gonds who did high school. They were just reluctant. Education did not interest them. And when Heimendorf was made in charge of this, he devised a study after studying their culture quite well before that. And there are 2 reports which we recently translated into Telugu, and they make for very interesting reading. He says that the Gonds have a culture, a social culture and a community culture, which is so fulfilling, which is so complete within itself that they don't feel like going out.
It has a time. Okay, that's what I just wanted to add.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for the clarification. These are projects and the projects end. And when the project ends, the funding for it ends, the personnel for it move to another project, and clearly whatever good it has managed to do. Whatever, yes, all the 3 steps forward, 2 back, at least. So in that sense, I wanted to ask Sujoy, of the 117 languages that CIL has been documenting, are there efforts to go beyond the documentation too, and try designing primers for them? Does that make sense? Is there an attempt to partner with, for example, civil society, NGOs working in the area of schooling in those geographies? And are there efforts to bring those languages, increase the domains of those languages, including education?
Thank you. As you said about the primer, I just wanted to inform, probably many of you know, I mean, recently, Government of India, they launched 101 primer already. 20 more is going to be launched. When we talk about education, it's under concurrent list of Constitution of India. 1976 onward, it's concurrent list. So it's not only central responsibility, it's responsibility of the state government also. Let's say we do something, it will be implemented or not. That decision should be taken by the state. We can't impose something. Okay, and the recent example from SPEL, we collaborated with the Toda community. Toda language spoken in Nilgiri Hills, Uti. So the community leader, at the same time, we invited Tamil Nadu government tribal welfare. I said, please, you send one of your representative also. So the primer is developed for Todas, and Tamil Nadu government, they are saying, okay, we are going to initiate a 3 months language course for Todas, and we are going to utilize your primer. And see, until and unless this sort of collaboration happen between central and state, all these initiative project, or let's say any other personal initiative or NGO initiative, that's not going to be successful.
Okay. So on that somber note, we'll open it up for Q&A. But before that, I just wanted to ask both of you, if either of you has a question for the other, maybe we could start with that, else we can move to the public.
I just want to show something which we had planned, but I think we ran over the time. Yeah, language is one aspect, but irrespective of language, because many tribal communities have lost their language, but their culture continues, right? So, for instance, you take Gonds spread over many states, many of them have lost their Gond language, but their culture and traditions continue. So it's not as if just because you lose language, you lose everything. That is not so, certainly. But in that aspect also, the work of documenting and archiving is very important. And the work that has been done already can also be utilized in a very interesting way. You see, a lot of documentation has happened, but it has been done by initially, European and English, British scholars, or later our university scholars. Some of them have done very good work, but it all is in the universities, in those English books, big tomes, many of them not available anywhere, out of print, etc. And the community, everyone in the community wants to know that we have this beautiful festival, this beautiful ritual, but why are we doing it? What is the meaning behind this? And the number of people who can answer this within the community has also decreased so fantastically. But you can still do the ritual and the festival without knowing the meaning and have all the benefits, but knowing it matters, okay? So that kind of information can come if we take back this research work and then hand it over to the community in some form. This is, sometimes called the return of the archive. Luckily, in Adilabad, I have been able to do this with the work of work of Haimandov, and also majorly the work of one of his students who came to Adilabad in the 70s. He made a fantastic documentary on this specific Dandari festival. And only after seeing that festival, I could understand that, it has this deeper significance. It narrates one story which Haimandov missed, for instance. And then he gave us 1500 photographs of how the community lives from the 70s. Although many aspects of their lives continue, some of them have changed, and then those you can find them in these photographs.
So who is this person?
His name is Michael York.
Yes.
Right? So Heimendorf and Michael York,
Y-O-R-K.
Y-O-R-K-E.
Y-O-R-K-E.
He's still alive, okay? And we translated two of his very scholarly essays into Telugu, which proper Telugu readers find it very difficult to understand because of the technical terminology, but you give it to Gonds, they understand it. It's about themselves. The technical terminology doesn't affect them. And so by bringing so now, those who can afford to read and understand these texts, they can understand their own culture, their own rituals, their own festivals, and their deeper meaning in a very fantastic way. And they can also narrate it to others, and it will definitely add to their pride.
Yes.
So, luckily, with one line I'll conclude. Many of us who are not tribals do not have this advantage because we didn't get that kind of documentation. Just because one or two Europeans worked on this Rajgond community in Telangana, they have a beautiful documentation, beautiful visual documentation also, from the 1940s. So that, in one sense, is a fantastic advantage they have now, which many other communities don't have.
Would you add something?
Can I be slightly light? See, all these Western scholars, whosoever came in India for language documentation or this sort of work, especially in Northeast, I don't know how many of them published their work with the community person.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Giving the credit, you mean?
Serious.
Sharing the credit, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this was Mother Meena's point as well in the previous session of not crediting the community you work with. Well, the floor is open. Should you have comments, questions, queries, agreements, disagreements? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for this very engaging session. I think the work that both of you are doing is very valuable, especially in the current situation where languages are disappearing at a faster rate. My question is it possible to, like the archival work that you're doing, is it possible to revive a language like currently? If there are like very few speakers in that language, is it possible to revive that language to a larger number of speakers, and or if not now, is it possible sometime in the future?
Yeah. See, this language endangerment. Sir, you want to? Oh, okay. See, language endangerment, and then another. Point came language revitalization. Language revitalization is possible, and here comes language documentation. Until and unless your language is documented, you can't revitalize that language. You need to have a starting point. Let's say I speak Bangla. If Bangla words or sentence is categorically not documented, after 50 years I can't start to revive that. Okay, this word in calls in Bangla probably 50 years back. So here's the language documentation is very much important.
Of course, it calls for substantial amount of will, not just from the community, but also from the state or any other funding agency. It calls for huge amount of patience, large support of scholars, etc. But it has been done. There are examples.
Yes, and it is intergenerational. The revitalization of Maori, for example, in New Zealand, is a process that has taken several decades. So that is the kind of stamina Sumanaspati is referring to, cultural stamina, for it to be transmitted, become a language of intergenerational transmission. So,
well, actually, the small point about the project and the policy. Even if a project is translated into policy, it still doesn't guarantee action. In Odisha, we started the multilingual education program in 2006. In 2014, we converted the project to a policy. I drafted the policy which was gazette notified by the government. And I thought, okay, at that time that this is a legal sanction, but nothing happened. The project has not really moved beyond just continuing as a small minor project. That is one thing that we need to know. Now that we have a national policy, hopefully, the mother tongue concept will percolate down to the tribal languages, but I doubt if it will ever be done.
Um, this is the reason, and this is not unique to India. This is the reason the United Nations has declared this decade the decade of indigenous languages, because this is the story everywhere, it seems, all over the world, that indigenous languages are in trouble. It's a matter of much concern. Did you want to add?
Persistent effort, both by the
Yes, sir. Persistent effort.
Maori,
Yeah.
Sami, and
Yes.
there are many languages
So,
which have been revived.
Yeah.
Professor Mahanti is giving the example of Maori and Sami in Finland, Maori in New Zealand, and his basic point is that it has to be a persistent effort. Thank
For
you.
instance, in Mizoram, the kind of work they have done, they have taken Mizo language to the postgraduate level. Now it's a literary language. So till a language is grounded back and reared through one or two generations, and then it gains literary expression, it will be very difficult to preserve the language. So that calls for fierce, almost fundamentalist amount of kind of courage and defiance and application. But it is worth it.
Yeah. Sorry, I just want to add one line with Professor Mohanty sir and Sumanaspati. See, sometimes state recognition is not enough. I'll take the example of West Bengal. Is there any Bengali? नहीं है कोई, ठीक है, अच्छा है, ठीक है. So, just before the last election, government of West Bengal announced 2 state languages added, Rajbangshi and Kamtapuri. School were initiated. Now, you don't ask me about the situation of the school. You go and visit the schools. Okay. Thank you.
So it's not enough to have just the policy document. Yes, sir. I see a hand right at the back, and that I think will be our last question.
Very interestingly, we all are talking about the language, but we are all talking in a different language, not in their language.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And we are trying to preserve that language.
Yes.
I don't know how far it is helpful to them, but documentation, policy makings are not going to help actually until and unless we are going to use that language as much as possible. That is where Oxford University in the introduction it also says, if you don't use, you will lose. That is what is happening. And we are talking about the language, but no one is here to discuss that language in the same language. First of all, we developed a kind of idea that all the tribal languages are lesser, and there is also kind of an identity. That identity makes these people feel that if they speak that language, they will be identified as tribals. So there is a discrimination. All that had come from the hegemony, and how do we enlighten and bring that hegemony to the tribals to understand that whichever the language they speak, that can be treated equally.
Good. Thank you. Bibliographic note. Do please look up Professor Mohanty's 2019 book, The Multilingual Reality. Many of the language attitudes that the gentleman there has mentioned are documented there, are discussed there, and what can be done about it. So I think on that note, exactly at 4:50, we shall have to say goodbye until next year. So thank you very much to my... Yes, please go ahead.
See, I have only one request. I don't know, government of India and state government, they are very positive. At least last few years for tribal education and languages. Several projects are coming by even Ministry of Tribal Affairs. They are very much active. And your Telangana and Andhra is also very active. They approached us for some projects. See, all these projects, I don't know what will happen. But until and unless you speak your language at home, I don't know what will happen. That is the main point. If you don't continue your home language at home, it is no more at use. The project can save your language.
And that of course everyone has to look into his home and see what's happening to his own mother tongue at his place. That's of course there. The tribal also have to do, the same problem has now come onto the tribals also. And yeah, the kind of Puritanist statement, let me, if you don't mind that, we have to use some language. We live amidst many languages, and to converse we have to use some language. That's not a sin.
So do please look at the photographs that Sumanaspati has exhibited all along this corridor, this side and that side, as we come to the end of our program. I thank the speakers and I thank the public. Thank you.